This opportunity has just been absolutely amazing.
I'm loving this experience.
I just enjoy every moment of it.
Quiet on set, rolling! Action!
The BFI Film Academy is for 16 to 25-year-olds across the UK who are interested in a career in the screen industries.
The BFI Film Academy offers everything from practical hands-on courses to traineeships and mentorships, and finally events and festivals.
We run 50 short courses across the UK where young people can learn about the different roles in the industry and how to make a short film. We also run specialist courses where young people can really focus on a specific area, such as documentary, craft skills, animation, art department, film festivals and audience development.
Our labs and scene events are available UK-wide, online and in person. Labs are monthly masterclasses, panel discussions and workshops led by industry professionals. Scene are our weekly Instagram Live events hosted by the BFI Film Academy Young Programmers. They're interviews with young filmmakers, giving them a chance to promote their films and giving you a chance to learn from your filmmaking peers.
Because of the Young Programmer scheme, I've really learned what I want to do with my career, and I've made the contacts and picked up the skills that I need to do that.
We run the Future Film Festival, which is the UK's largest film festival for young people. We have masterclasses, panel discussions, workshops and screenings.
Making a film in general is a cool thing, but being able to show it here at BFI South Bank is just incredible.
We offer mentoring schemes and an incredible opportunity to take part in our traineeship programme, where we have placed young people on films such as Star Wars, Black Widow and Bond.
This opportunity means the world to all the trainees.
I wouldn't have got this opportunity if it wasn't for the BFI.
Because of the BFI Film Academy, I feel like my voice matters.
Without the BFI Film Academy, I would not be in the film industry at all. So thank you to the Film Academy.
That's a cat, yep.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today. We will be discussing how to become a film and TV composer. We have three brilliant composers here, who will join me very shortly. They all have very varying experiences and approaches to scoring for film and TV projects. I'd love to start with each of our panelists to introduce themselves and share a brief background. If you'd all like to join me, please. Thank you. Emilie, would you like to kick us off?
Hi, I'm Emilie Levienaise-Farrouch, and I've been working mostly on feature films over the past few years, as well as releasing albums. So I guess I come from the artist route into film composition. I moved to London 15 years ago to study music, first at Westminster, and then did MA in composition at Goldsmiths, which is when I kind of started working on short films.
Lovely, thank you. Addie, would you like to go next?
So my name's Addie, or Adiescar Chase, and I graduated from the National Film and Television School last year, around May time, and before that I did an undergrad at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, but I've been, working on media, film, short films, games for a while, but I've really been stuck in the last year or so working on a variety of projects, including a Netflix show which is going to come out in spring called Heartstopper.
Lovely, thank you. And Christian?
Hi there, my name's Christian Henson. I've been a professional composer for about 25 years now. I didn't go the standard route. I don't actually read music. I actually started my career as a media composer writing music for porn films. And since then, I'm very happy to say that I've done a mixture of kind of Hollywood movies, independent movies, some very big TV shows, one of which I'm really proud of and is still going on is a thing called Inside Number 9. I'm also involved in various enterprises with lots of kind of communities of composers, so can also bring to this panel a degree of consensus from the many composers that I've met over the last 15 to 25 years.
Lovely, thank you so much, everyone. So yes, as Harry mentioned, for the session, we will be covering a bit of an overview of scoring for film and TV, what you can expect, how you can prepare, as well as some tips and tricks for starting out as a new composer. We'll cover everything from project managing your own commissions all the way through to possibly working with an agent and taking on sort of feature films and TV series. We'll also cover a few general things that you can bear in mind, things like self-promotion, how to build a composer reel and kind of put yourself out there as a composer. As Harry said, I'm Ed Marquis. I'm the creative producer at McDade, and it's lovely to be here, and thanks so much for joining us. Let's begin then with starting out as a new composer. You know, it might be quite a new thing from becoming a graduate. So Emilie, let's start with you again and keep our order. What would you say are some of the most important things to bear in mind with sort of self-promotion at the beginning and starting out and kind of putting yourself out there? Is it essential to have a kind of clear composer identity from the off?
Well, I think in order to put yourself out there, before promoting yourself, it's good to try to have a little bit of a body of work. So I would say before putting yourself out there, try to find young filmmakers, people who are doing, or, you know, either short film or video artists, people who will benefit from collaborating with a musician in their work. And, you know, find your people, find your collaborator first, do some project that you're happy with, that you're excited about. And then once you have a work that kind of speaks for itself, then it's worth, you know, thinking about Instagram, thinking about website and things like that. But I would say the first step is kind of working out who you are as a musician and a collaborator before promoting yourself. And that would be from, I guess, a festival like this one or short film festival, and even reaching out to film schools or programs that have film students or fine artists, and just trying to find people whose work you really, really like, and just reaching out to those people and see if they would be up for working together on something. But I would say the first step is to, have a body of work you're proud to share with the world.
Yes, really interesting. Addie, would you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I really agree with everything Emilie said, and it's important to get that body of work from the beginning. And there are just so many different paths to becoming a film composer, but one of the main things is, like Emilie said, just getting that body of work. So, you know, there are film schools, or you can reach out to film schools. When I was at Guildhall, there was Westminster Film School I reached out to, Kingston University, there were some brilliant animators there that I reached out to. It's, you know, it doesn't hurt to try just messaging people, giving them examples of your work, even if it's just a show reel you've worked on personally. And then, going to networking events, which I know for some people can be really scary. You know, everyone's in the same boat pretty much. You just go. And I've been to some networking events where there's not been many people, but I've met some really lovely people. And other events where it's been, you know, bustling, and I've kind of found it really hard to kind of have a nice long conversation with someone. But there are pros and cons to each type of networking event like that, and there are just so many. If you go on Eventbrite and just search film networking event or games networking event or anything, you know, things usually pop up, or you just kind of have to keep searching and looking and just go to everything, even if you end up going and think, well, that wasn't really worth it, but you just don't know. So it's about putting yourself out there and just trying to meet as many people as you can and building up that rapport with people, and like Emilie said, again, that body of work.
Yes, I suppose it's very difficult in today's age with a lot of remote working and not as much networking in person. But it's great that things like this and Eventbrite really do put on a lot of things on Zoom, especially. And Christian, I suppose coming from your background, you know, not necessarily reading music, would you say that's been a different kind of way in terms of building up that portfolio? Have you had to find your niche within the market to kind of get your musical foot in the door, I suppose?
Well, I think they say style is defined by your limitations. And I think that the job of being a composer is there are so many different facets to it that I don't think there is such a thing as a Renaissance person. So I'm quite a good programmer. I'm not a particularly great orchestrator, so I'll get an orchestrator to help me. And I know great orchestrators have become great composers, but maybe aren't so strong at programming. So I don't think that you should ever see your lack of education is something to hold you back. However, I do think that the most important thing when you're starting out is to embrace the fact that it will take time before you become a working composer. And by that, I describe being a working composer as that's all you do and that's how you earn your money. And I think that what I see is a growing resentment and frustration, and I suffered from this myself, of, come on, I've been doing this for 2 years now. Why aren't I getting the big feature films? You've got to be prepared for the long haul. And I think one of the best things to do is to look at finding work assisting people, whether that be music editing or assisting composers, because it enables you to do your 10,000 hours whilst also learning and earning money from the industry. And I think that's just really important to understand, that the job of a composer isn't just composing music. It's about being a head of department, and therefore people are looking for experience. But just to go back to Emilie's original point, just for goodness sake, just be original. I was involved in a project where we had 70,000 entries for a scoring competition. Every single one sounded the same. So it's finding your own voice, even if it's crazy.
Yes, that's very good advice. Actually, it's easy to kind of follow a mold, but in today's day and age, it's nice to find a kind of niche. Actually, you make a very good point about assisting and sort of music editing and, in some ways, additional music. Do you have any advice on what might make a good assistant, Christian?
Yeah, being just really nice and willing to learn. I just think, again, just touching on what Emilie and Adiescar said, just reaching out to people. I think that it's quite difficult to do. People tend to be quite shy. But, I've had an assistant who worked for me for a year, who's now gone on to be a composer in his own right. And he literally came up to me at one of these events. It was at BAFTA, and he said, "Christian, you look really tired." And I said, "Yeah, I'm really overworked at the moment." He went, "Do you need any help?" I went, "Yes." So I just think kind of reaching out to composers' agents is very good. I know that I've often, if I really need the cavalry, I'll speak to my agent, and she'll go, "Well, I met someone about 6 months ago who I think would be a good fit for you." But yeah, present yourself well and be kind of a nice person, and then we know how much you learn on the job.
Yeah, lovely. And we talked about sort of finding your own voice. You obviously all have very different experiences, but Emilie, would you say how many sort of voices have you had throughout your career? Has it always been one, or has it kind of grown over time?
Well, I think there was the music that I was really responding to, and that was very natural to me. And then I think what can happen at the start of a career is you tend to take the projects that comes towards you. And I think quite quickly I realized that the things that were coming my way would expect me to write a certain type of music that was probably right for the project, but was not something I wanted to be doing for the next 30 years, which was when I kind of took a step back. And then you have to find your authentic self, like your authentic artistic self. And that might just be taking like months where you're not going to share any music with anyone, and just not. That's like the moment where sometimes music education can come in the way, because you spend years with people telling you how you're supposed to compose, how music is supposed to work, how harmony is supposed to work. And I think when you feel yourself a bit stuck in those this impression that you understand music, it's the moment where you have to throw it all away, lock yourself in a cave, and just scratch everything you know, and try to find something where you're just really going to get excited about it. Not excited because on paper it's right, because you worked it out following the rules, but just because you get like a kind of primal reaction of like, "Ooh, this sound is really cool. I want to push it further." And I think it's very important, to remind yourself that this career is, as Christian said, it's going to take a very long time to get there. And you're probably not going to retire until you're very old. So you might as well make sure you're known for a sound that you're genuinely excited about. So take the time to find something that excites you, even if it has nothing to do with anything that you've been taught at university or in conservatoire.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Addie, same question for you, I think.
So I was thinking about this the other day, and it's really hard to kind of put into words of, how do you find your own voice? And that is something of self-discovery. You do need to just find that out yourself. But I was kind of trying to think, what can I actually say that will be helpful? And, as we've been all saying, like, it takes a while to kind of build up your craft. And a lot of people start out by, replicating things. They, you can do just little exercises for yourself to listen to some music and try and copy it, or to come up with something that's similar but different, or, you try and kind of listen to lots of music and find all these different inspirations. And the more you do that, the more you pick out the things that you like, the more you pick out the things that you find that you're naturally maybe you find easier to compose, or you just enjoy doing. And then after a while, after composing lots of different tracks, you start to kind of figure out certain ways and methods that you again find really useful or you're comfortable with. Every composer works differently, and I think that's part of what makes it a unique sound to them. So the more you explore, the more you write, and the more you create music, the more you'll find these little tricks and these little things that you find helpful, and that kind of helps become part of your sound. So even when you're approached as a composer to say, hey, I want you to compose for this project in this style, and it might be completely different style-wise to your other projects. Again, if it's something that you enjoy doing and you're happy to compose for, even if it's a different style, you'll find your inner voice comes out because of the way in which you compose it and the way in which you kind of go around doing it. And I don't think it's as black and white maybe as I'm saying, because it's music is just a creative process that we can all explore and have a different voice that comes out of it. But I think that's one of the things I've learned, that in the way that people do things and the way that I do things, there's a kind of a voice there that develops over time. Yeah.
One of my big things is I think restricting yourself is key. I've met quite a famous composer who he has this rule that he allows himself to buy new instruments provided he has to feature them in the next job that he works on. And he was in the Caribbean, and he's a percussionist, and he saw this steel band, and he thought, I should get some steel drums. So he bought some steel drums, and then Steven Soderbergh ran up and said, we're doing a science fiction film. And he had to obey his rules. So he created a science fiction score from steel drums, and that's the score for Solaris, which is seminal. Probably his best, Cliff Martinez.
Yes, that's so interesting. It's funny knowing what kind of instruments can lead you down different paths and kind of force you into worlds that you may not have kind of expected to be in.
I think also not relying on commercial sample libraries is probably a good thing. I'd suggest, if I'm ever stuck, I just stick a microphone on a teacup. And I know no one else has got that sound.
Yes, I suppose, do you think it's quite important to have quite an open kind of mind when adapting your creative process, especially quite, I suppose, sort of nearer the beginning of your career where you're sort of finding this voice? Do you think it's important to be open to adaptation within that?
I think the thing that you've got to empathize with the people who are listening to showreels. And for most ears, after the second piece of orchestral music, it will just all sound the same to people who won't understand the nuance and, this is an interesting use of bitonality versus that which was a bit more kind of tonal and all of that kind of stuff. So I just think, really kind of, my mum was a dancer and she always used to put her shoes on loosely, and so that she'd kick them off into the audience so she'd get noticed. So I think it is about kind of being just a different voice. And even if they don't employ you to do that, it's getting noticed.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
I just want to say as well that, when you're young as well and you're starting out, that's the time to experiment. Like, just do it. Don't be scared. Like, I don't want people to think that I'm doing the wrong thing, or, this is the time. Just go crazy, try out different things, and, have conviction in what you do. And then later that'll be fine. Yeah.
Especially like going back to the Solaris example, if you really think about it, all the seminal scores are the ones that completely ripped apart the rulebook and started something completely new, and then everyone was copying. So genuinely the best way to make a splash as a film composer is to come up with something that's just like completely fresh and completely new. So it's in your interest to just push yourself and find something that's just you.
I am always envious of instrumentalists. I can just about play the piano, but don't play any other instruments. And, if I ever meet a composer who's like a guitarist, I'm like, lean into that. Listen to the scores of Gustavo Santaolalla. And what's the name of that saxophonist, guys? The guy who plays
baritone.
Colin, yeah, I mean, he's a saxophonist. And he's just, I saw him live and he's wild, but his scores are just incredible.
Yes, yeah. We've actually got a really good question here from Daline, I think. I've probably said that wrong, apologies. What advice do you have for someone who has zero experience in filmmaking or within film score, but would like to get into a career path? Emilie, let's start with you.
I would say you should watch Spitfire Audio YouTube channel. It will have all the information you need. No, but genuinely it's a very good starting point in terms of outlining how the process takes place. There's so many more resources now online. So yeah, read books on the subject, watch lots of videos on the subject, read books about filmmaking also, just like how movies are made, not just the audio part. And yeah, go to panels and just, there's many ways to find education online at the moment. It's really great time to get started on something that you have no idea how to do.
Lovely. And Addie, do you have anything to add to that?
I think that's all really good advice, and that's certainly something to start off and do. And then if you meet someone or you're looking to network or find, someone to work with, or for you find someone who's making a short film, just go for it. If you have experience in music, it doesn't matter if it's not to do with film, or you're just literally starting out, just go for it if they're happy to work with you, or even just find a video online. Or I used to make little videos in my bedroom and then make the music to it, because that's all I wanted to do when I was younger. And you can just gain experience that way as well. Like, it won't necessarily tell you too much about the nitty-gritty part of the industry once you get bigger projects, but it will certainly help give you a feel and an idea for how to compose for film and other things like that. Just throw yourself into it.
I would say it really isn't rocket science. No offense to Emilie and Addie, in the sense of, I think it's kind of like chess. You can learn it in a day, but it takes a lifetime to master, is my humble opinion. So it's not to be scared. But again, of all the composers I've met, it's very rare that I meet a composer who doesn't mention another composer who has affected their life somehow. And I think that instead of seeing other composers as competitors, we're actually incredibly supportive of each other. And it's just getting out into that community. For me, it was Anne Dudley. She wanted some drum programming, and then she just really stuck her neck out for me. For Harry Gregson Williams, it was Hans Zimmer, and for Hans Zimmer, it was Stanley Myers. So I do actually think meeting other composers is a great way of gaining experience, and watching them make mistakes as well.
Yes, I think that's very sound advice. Being prepared to make mistakes is a really important thing, and being open to the kind of trial and error of finding your own voice, as well as collaborating with filmmakers and directors. Kind of going on more into kind of putting yourself out there as a fairly sort of new composer, I suppose. It would be really nice to talk about reels. Reels are obviously very important to kind of best show your work and the sort of work that you want to be doing, as well as the brilliant work that you have done. In your view, do you have any sort of key do's and don'ts, I suppose, when kind of creating a reel and building a reel to show your work? Emilie, let's start with you.
I don't have a reel. I never had one. I make playlists for each project. So every time there's like someone wanting to for me to like pitch for a film or anything, I kind of read the outline and stuff, and then pick my like 5-6 tracks of mine or cues that I think would be how I interpret the brief, and I send that over. But I don't have a video reel.
Addie, go for it.
So I have a few reels that I created after the NFTS that I didn't put all of them online. Like I would send them off to certain people, and one was just general film and TV style stuff, and another one was for games. Some advice I'd give in terms of reels is, and this is just generally speaking, again, like Emilie said, if there's a specific project, I send off specific tracks because that's what they're stuff that isn't anything to do with what they're actually looking for. So doing that's really smart. But if it's a general thing of just getting your name out there, not making a reel too long, try and show the best bits of the music. Try and if it's a general reel, try and show a variety if that's what you're into, or at least showing different skill sets of writing something that's quite melodic, or writing something that's more atmospheric, or whatever you want to put out there. There's no right or wrong answer, but yeah, not too long. Like if you sent off like a half-hour reel of, like, for one, it'll take forever to upload, and two, I don't think people will want to watch through that all. But loads of composers I know have SoundCloud as well, where they put reels and you can create playlists, so you can be more specific with what you want to show and in what order. Or I have on my website a bunch of videos, so you can, like, visually, I find it really interesting when I'm listening to music, just to match it with a visual is really great. But yeah, I think and I started off as well where before I went to uni or anything, I created a show reel that I then took down, and after a few years I looked back and I thought, oh God, that was terrible. But at the time, that was the standard that I was at. And you have to, you create some new music and you think, oh, this is so much better than my previous music, and so on and so forth. So you can upload stuff and then a year or so later create a new one, take the other one down. If you're advancing, you don't be ashamed to feel like, oh, I can't believe that was what I created. Everyone improves, but just putting something out there and then working off that is really important. The other thing as well is that people wait. Like, they don't want to put their music out there. They think, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not going to release this. So I used to do this thing where if I wanted to put something online or release something, I would do it just before I had to go and do something else. So either go for a run or go to the gym or see a friend, and I'll just go, right, 3, 2, 1, post it, and then run. And I'd be completely distracted by whatever my next task was. And then by the time I came back, I would either have kind of forgotten about it, or at least not forgotten, but just wasn't stressed by it. So that's a good tip if you're feeling a bit nervous about posting anything or releasing anything. Just do it before you have to go do something else, and then you'll be fine.
Yes, it's very many ways of sort of getting your music out there, isn't there? Christian, I wanted to ask, we've got a really good question from Laura. What type of person in the film industry do you approach and work closely with during the film? Producer, sound editor, director? Do you always tend to work with the same kind of production person, whether it's the director or the producer? Yeah.
It's primarily the director. So the producer employs you. So what they tend to be looking for is they're employing you to deliver a score, and that's what you're contracted to do. So producers tend to like people with experience. But also what I'm noticing more often these days is, because everyone can contact everyone else, what they'll tend to do is look at what you've done and go, oh, I know the producer on that one. I'll give her a call or him a call and just see if Christian was an arsehole or not. Or, he hit the deadlines, all of that kind of stuff. So I think, but then you tend to work with a director who cares about you helping them tell the story, really. The picture editor can be someone that I think befriend the picture editor always. They can be our enemies in a funny kind of way, in the sense of they'll put your tracks on or go, and actually I'll just keep American Beauty on for a little while longer, and all of that kind of stuff. But I think that I've been thinking about this recently, and I think that as you're building yourself up, there's three things that you really need to work on. Your chops as a composer, as Addie says, but also your reputation, I think, is really important, but also your experience. These things all will feed into each other. And what's brilliant is there's a way of creating a reputation, and that is by having a social media presence. And I'm really seeing the power of people who have YouTube channels, people who do interesting modular setups on Instagram and stuff. This is a way that you can create a brand. And I think that that's absolutely crucial. I think by focusing in on show reels, and if I may be so bold, I think this is maybe a slightly old-fashioned way of looking at stuff. I think that what we're doing is implying that there's this open marketplace, and I think it's a closed market. And what it is about building a profile and a brand as much as it is putting your music out there, which you must do as well, naturally. But things like, maybe this is very terrible, but I'm very conscious of taste, and often if I go to someone's website, you tend to get a kind of an idea of their taste from that. So just be aware of your touch points. So it is your music, but it is also the banner that you put at the top of your SoundCloud. All of these little things like, oh, they look like they really have good taste. We're just human, so if we feel we know people, we'll tend to go with them. So get out there and get known.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I suppose kind of building yourself to have the reputation as well comes with kind of word of mouth through other composers, as well as directors and music editors and picture editors and the like. But do
you know the espresso machine story, Ed?
I don't. Please.
There's a very, very successful composer. He's very young. And he basically was aware that in all of the major publishers, they had terrible coffee. So he paid for the best Italian espresso machines, and he pimped them so that they had his surname on them, and he put them in all of the major publishing companies in England and America. And so when people met him at events and stuff, it's like, oh, so you're the coffee guy. So a novel way of marketing, but it seems to have been very effective.
Yes, it's probably quite a nice way to be known as the coffee guy, actually. I think that's, as it goes, a pretty good way to be known. Thank you. Really, really interesting advice. I suppose sort of moving into general scoring of actual film and TV projects, would you say, this is kind of for the floor again, would you say the storytelling within scoring for a film or a TV series is similar to sort of shorter form advertising and some games and sort of promos? Would you say the storytelling is similar, or are there sort of challenges and kind of other things that you have to overcome in order to score for longer form? Emilie, let's start with you again.
I think the consideration of the structure of the score is different just because of length. On the short form, if you think about advertisement, you're just going to have one piece of music, so you only need to think about the shape of that one piece to tell the story of that short form video. On a short film, this is a concept that you're going to extend over 6 to 40 minutes. So you have to think, what I mean by the structure is you kind of have to think in terms of when is going to be the moment where the music might be the most intense, and kind of building towards that moment of that cue that might be the most emotional, or like the biggest action cue. So you have to not only think about the music in terms of how the sound palette is going to relate to the story, in terms of how the melody or the motifs might relate to the characters, but how the music is going to evolve through time in a specific shape that's kind of similar to the storytelling. And obviously, the longer the form, the more the kind of structural consideration. So how you're going to evolve the material, how you're going to make sure you pace yourself, are you going to make sure you're not going too hard from the get-go, etc., etc. You have to consider that more. While on shorter form, you kind of can just be like, okay, let's go all melody, or you concentrate things a little bit more because it's shorter. So yeah, it's slightly different in terms of how much you have to plan your music across time, over time, on longer form storytelling. But the essence of it is the same, I would say. It's still connecting with an emotion, connecting with a character, and trying to understand what the music brings to the project, what layer of narrative the music adds to the project.
Lovely, thank you. Addie?
Yeah, I think I'd echo everything that Emilie said as well. From my personal experience, you know, every project is different, and I did quite a few short films last year, which were all really different, both stylistically and in terms of how music heavy they were. But with those shorter projects, you do then, have to think about, like Emilie said, the way that it develops, how much time you have to think about those things. When I was doing Heartstopper, I remember having discussions with the director about what the progression would be from episode 1 all the way to the last episode. And it's interesting because you kind of discover that as you go as well. So again, that's another thing you have to consider if you're working on something that has episodes or is a series, or I've been assisting as well, where music editing on another show that came out the other day, and that was the second series. So I didn't work on the first one, but I already heard a development from that series from the first one, and then there was still more progression within that as well. So when you have these projects that go on for longer, you not only can plan ahead, but also discover more as you go as well, which is really enjoyable as a composer and probably helpful and enjoyable for the viewers. Games, I think, is different because whilst the story, you have to consider the story in the same way, and you can have cutscenes and certain animations to score to picture. A lot of it is, you know, creating these kind of tracks that loop, or stems that you can then integrate into the middleware software, which is basically a software that implements the music into the game. And then it's a little bit more of a complicated aspect because you're trying to preempt what the player might do, which you can't. Because they might do, it depends on the game, but it's just a different way of thinking, which I think is really, if you're into that, it's really enjoyable because you're it's almost like a puzzle, trying to piece it together, or having real discussions with the team to say, right, in this area of the game, this will happen, or I said before when I've worked on something, can we implement this so that when this dangerous thing comes closer, a bass can creep in? And, you know, it's just really fun to kind of think how music really does interact with what happens in the game as well. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. So I suppose there's a few different ways of kind of approaching things, but Christian, from your experience, have you sort of found that there is a perfect way to prepare for a longer form commission scoring project, or is it about kind of being prepared to kind of be open-minded and kind of take it on a case-by-case basis?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me, I always just say to potential clients is get me on early, and we can experiment. If you get me on late, then we won't have that opportunity. And there's, you know, I mean, I guess that's one of the reasons why occasionally I'll, you know, we at certain points in our careers will probably fill in for a composer who's just been fired. And it's just making the client know that they don't have the luxury of time and experimentation at that point. And then I think that the best thing to do is just to ask what the role of the music is. You know, I prefer to help the director tell stories and to get inside the characters' heads. But there are calls for just creating an atmospheric underscore. There's calls for just amping up what's already on screen and that kind of stuff. And it's just establishing that. I think for me, what I've learned to do is to, when I'm pitching, and I think that's when the creative process starts, is I just try and suggest a way of doing it that I know I'm going to enjoy. And then that'll mean I'm the right person for it if they pick me. So recently, I said yes to a very long-term project, but I'm in Scotland and I don't want to go down to London all the time. So I said, have you ever thought of folk John Williams? And they went, yeah, that's a great idea. And well, that's great because I can work with all the Scottish folk musicians and I'm definitely the right person for that job if that's what they wanted. But if they didn't, you know, it wasn't about me making all sorts of personal sacrifices for the next 3 years, potentially. You know, with these computer games, as you mentioned, Addie, that can be 2-3 years of your life. So I think the creative process starts at pitch stage.
Yeah, really interesting. And it's funny what you say about musicians, because it can be very important to have a sort of good network of musicians, either as friends or as collaborators. But I suppose it's very important to have good musicians and good players at your disposal.
And Ed, this just cycles right back to the beginning of being original, and that is just something. I mean, I'm proud to say I'm very good friends with a guy called Olafur Arnalds, and he has a group of musicians who are his sound, and that's something he's collaborated on with them. And I just think that I mean, the reason I'm a composer is to work with musicians, and they make our lives so much easier. And I think that that's a consideration, is to find. I've got a brother called Keaton who works with this amazing cellist called Ren, and they have a relationship. And I think that's something really worth considering when creating your own voice, is to meet some great musicians.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. It's really sound advice. I'm conscious that we've got about sort of 10-15 minutes left, and we've got some really brilliant questions. So let's move on to a few questions. Actually, sort of kind of moving on from what we were just talking about. Someone's asked, is it possible to become a composer without playing an instrument, i.e. only composing within the box? Emilie, what do you think about that? Obviously, you're a pianist yourself. And of course, kind of well versed in composing within the box. What would you say?
I mean, yeah, most of my work is in the box. I don't necessarily have that much hardware. I mean, it is useful to, even if you're not a great pianist, to be able to input notes using a keyboard is very advantageous. But I mean, there's a lot of sounds that I use in my score that I wouldn't say I'm able to play those instruments, but I, give it a go, and then you just put a bunch of effects on it and it sounds cool. Like you shouldn't, there's a difference between, if you're talking about not being a virtuoso at an instrument, you don't need to, but I think you shouldn't be afraid to pick up a sound making thing and see what you can get out of it, even if you're not very good at it. Like, it's okay. And even if you can't play the guitar, get a guitar anyway and see what sounds you can get out of it. Like, don't get the fact that you're not very good at playing an instrument stop you from having fun with instruments, because this kind of acoustic source of sound can be extremely inspiring, and you can have a lot of fun with it even if you're not very good. So yeah, I think you can do everything within the box, but yeah, just pick an instrument, see what you can get out of it. It's fun. Have fun with it.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah, that's really interesting. I suppose this is going back to what we were sort of talking about earlier, Christian. Lucy has asked, do you have any recommendations for getting into composition for someone that may not have as much technical knowledge about music? She's just finished a film degree, but feels slightly stuck on how to move into the musical side.
I just think have a go. There's plenty of free libraries out there you can buy, and as Emilie said, I mean, I'm a big fan of charity shops and just going and finding things and sampling them, and that's what's fun about composing. It's a voyage of discovery, and just to really, I mean, I've been to a place called Bleeding Fingers, which is Hans Zimmer's kind of factory, literally, and there's a guy there who's hugely successful, and he literally inputs every note with a mouse. And there is I recently did an interview with a composer who is an appalling piano player, and his name is Martin Phipps. And I didn't believe him. And he said, no, even Hans Zimmer, when he watched me play the piano, said, you're just awful at the piano. And Martin Phipps, I think, is one of the best composers in the country at this time. And he's a composer. That's music. And he can't play.
Yes, that's very interesting. It's just goes to show that you really don't need to be a virtuosic musician to write brilliant film scores.
I would say if you can't play, teach. If you can't teach, compose.
Very good. I like that, actually. We've got another question from Jacob. How much time are you usually given to compose the score? Are you ever in a position where you need to ask for more time? Addie, have you had any experience in this kind of topic?
I think that you can always feel like you need more time. You get to the end of something and you're thinking, oh, I just wish I had another day. But it's good to relinquish after a while. Projects really vary. I think sometimes you can have quite a lot of time. If anything, sometimes when you have a lot of time, it depends what you're like under pressure. It gives you more time to experiment. Like Christian was saying, the earlier that they get a composer on board, the more time you have to play around with ideas. That's really great. But other times you'll get people say, look, I have a commercial, can you do it tomorrow? Like, this is something from film school, and if it can be done, it can be done. But then again, they have to understand, if you haven't got much time, there'll be a certain standard that you're delivering at. But yeah, I think you can always feel like you need more time to compose for a project, but it's again it depends as well, like what kind of score you're doing. If you're doing something that's quite big and orchestral, you have to kind of get people in to orchestrate and score it, and then book session players in. Or if you're even dealing with a smaller chamber ensemble, getting a fixer to book the players, or finding players yourself, that can all take time. And if it's something that's more kind of just in your studio, electronic music or anything like that, you don't have to worry without all that kind of organizing that sort of things or going somewhere. So yeah, it really does depend on the project, but again, it completely depends on what you're comfortable with. If you think it's enough time or not. Always ask. I think there's never a problem to ask, hey, would it be possible? And if they say no, they say no. But don't feel under pressure to just do it. And that if you don't have enough time feeling stressed, do ask. And then if they say no, that's fine.
Yeah.
There are many with multi-episodic stuff. Occasionally, and this is something you should talk to the producer about. It's just go, listen, this particular episode is really hardcore. Is there any way I can get an extension? And often what I find is they'll swap around dub dates. And you go, it's all right, episode 4 is really easy. And they'll just, because they want the best out of you. Yeah, so I'm with you, Addie. Just never, ever suffer in silence. You're part of a crew. You're part of a team.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you. This is quite an interesting question that's just popped up. This is sort of moving, I suppose, sort of slightly further into a career with regards to agency or management. We've got a question here that's, do you need to have management and be part of an agency to really make it as a composer? I suppose there's several ways of looking at this, but Emilie, in your experience, do you think having management and an agent behind you is really important?
I did my first features without agent. I would say it's good to wait until agents are starting to come to you rather than approaching people. I will say that there is like a moment in your career where the projects are getting a little bit more complicated, where you start to have to hire a musician, music studios and things like that, where it can be, or the contracts are getting a little bit trickier. And then having the expertise of an agent and the support of an agent, and also just to not have to have any money conversation with the producers anymore. It's your agent who gets that bad cop role, and you can just focus on the artistic is very, very useful, because you have people who support you and who can help you focus on creating the music. And it's really amazing, but there's no rush. I think it tends to happen quite smoothly, because agents do, every time I have a film, like in a festival, even if I do have an agent, you have other agents who contact you. Like, they're very good at kind of keeping an eye on who does what. So wait until an agent contacts you, and then you'll know when you're ready.
Yes, I think that's very good advice. It's the sort of thing that needs to happen quite naturally. And us at Management Day especially have always been sort of about kind of it needing to be the right time for a composer and an agent, so that both parties get the most out of a sort of working relationship like that, I suppose. We've got a couple of more sort of general questions. I really like this question because it's there are many different ways to answer this, but the question is, where is the best place to release your music? So that could be sort of as an artist or a composer, I suppose, if you're releasing soundtracks. But Christian, what would you say? Is there a perfect, ideal place? It's very general.
No, I don't know. I mean, I've never made any money out of soundtrack albums, and I mean, I think that the way that Emilie has gone by being an artist is a great way to go. I think you've got to be a good artist, and Emilie, fortunately, you are incredibly talented in that respect. I'm more of a hack, so yeah. I will just go over this again. It's just you won't believe the power of YouTube and social media. And if you're not going to do it, your contemporaries, the people that you're kind of possibly competing with, they're going to be doing it. And I just think it's absolute. There's some composers that I represent, and it just drives me up the wall that they don't get onto social media and get known, because the people who are just, happy, they're just having the pick of the crop.
Lovely, thank you. So I think we might have time for just one more question. This is a nice one. How do you cope with the indifferences with filmmakers when you really feel it will damage the output of the project? In example, temp tracks and fixed views on music. Addie, what do you think there?
That's a really interesting question for me, because coming from a film school, and it's quite fresh in my mind, you get to collaborate with so many different people, and they all want to work in a different way, and they all have different ideas of what's good and what's not good. And again, you have to kind of think to yourself, people who want to make something want to make it good. Like, no one's going into a project thinking, right, I'm going to do this and it's going to be terrible. Yes. Like, they just won't think that. And it's not to say that they're right or wrong, but it shouldn't be a matter of arguing or heavily discussing what you think is right or wrong. It's more about discovering together what works. And I think sometimes for me, it would save a lot of conversation and pressure to just create something that was what they wanted, or something that what you wanted, and it depends how much time you have. Again, my personal approach to that would be, like I just said, having a discussion with them and saying, okay, I understand what you're saying, this is what your opinions are, this is what I'm feeling would work, and I'm worried maybe this doesn't work, but you know what, I'll do what you've asked, and I have time to do that, and I have time to do my own thing as well. Or if you don't have time to do anything, just go with what they've done. But at least you've kind of said to them, I've considered what you've said, I'll go along with it, I'm worried about this. And it's just a constant discussion, and you'll come across people that you don't work well with. Like, everyone has differences, and I think you have to be big enough and polite enough to just get on with it and not take things too personally. But yeah, it'll be a constant discovery. There's no trick to collaborating. That is one of the things you just have to kind of learn and do. But like Christian said right at the beginning of this whole panel, don't be a nice person. don't be rude, but never be afraid to speak your mind as well. It's just the way it comes across, I think, you can consider.
I would say that they're really terrified. Music is a terrifying dark art to directors, and I think you just have to help them along that journey. I just have one trick, Ed, if I may share it with you. The thing that is most common about temp music versus the music you're trying to get on is that temp music will have live musicians on it. So what I tend to do is, really early in the process, I'll find a great musician who will be like the voice for and then suddenly the director will get a sense of ownership of something really special. And I think so, even sometimes the contract hasn't been signed, but I'm on board, I may actually fork out a couple £100 to get that Bulgarian Thracian singer on, to give them something that's really unique, and the director gets to own throughout the process. That's just my little trick.
That's really lovely, thank you. That's feels like a really lovely place to end things. Thank you so much for all the brilliant questions. Sorry if we didn't get around to answering a few of them. Firstly, thank you so much to our brilliant panelists. It's been super interesting and lovely to hear all your thoughts and tips and tricks and advice. Thank you too to the BFI and the BFI team working behind the scenes here, and to the Future Film Festival. It's been really lovely, and thanks so much for joining us.